Mr. Board Chair, no, we do not have any public comments.
All right, thank you. We'll proceed then to approval of the minutes for the last meeting of July 21st. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? All right. If not, a motion to approve them, please.
Move to approve.
All right, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the minutes are passed. So we'll move immediately to the business of this meeting, and that begins with a presentation on the CVTA by Adrian Torres. Ms. Torres, are you here?
I am here. Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Just give you guys a quick update on what's been happening with CVTA and what's going to be happening in the near future. Just background on CVTA. It was created via legislation approved by the General Assembly of the Commonwealth of Virginia during its 2020 session, which legislation became effective on July 1st. The CVTA is a new entity comprising of the jurisdictions within Planning District 15, City of Richmond, Town of Ashland, counties of Henrico, Chesterfield, Hanover, Goochland, Powhatan, New Kent, and Charles City. The CVTA also includes representatives from the House of Delegates, the Senate, the Commonwealth Transportation Board, DRPT and GRTC, the Richmond Metropolitan Transportation Authority, and the Commissioner of Highways. So between March and August, there has been a lot of work done. There's the Transportation Working Group. They've been meeting regularly to develop the structure. They've been drafting the bylaws, they draft the policy and guidance documents. They've set the meeting calendar as well as the agenda. I believe the save the date or the meeting invite just went out yesterday. They've coordinated the members and the designee list, and they've started coordinating some of the ad hoc committee as well as the recommendations that will be presented to CVTA during their first meetings. They've done the resolution of support for Plan RVA, and what that is for them to support CVTA. They will be doing the staffing of it during the interim. So between August 19th and the 24th, we plan on having a kickoff meeting to start looking at GRTC and the MPO's regional public transportation plan. So this will just be a work group to look over the effort. August 27th is the first meeting, the inaugural meeting. It is set at the Greater Richmond Convention Center, but there's also a virtual option. By December 1st will be the governance structure that will be presented for transit service. And then by December 31st is the goal, kind of aligning with our TDP dates for regional public transportation plan. That is what has been happening a lot, and a lot will be coming forward. Questions?
Yeah, I have some questions, Adrian. Just to kind of go through these, the Transportation Working Group that's been kind of standing the thing up. Are you on that group?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. Are you the only GRTC rep on that?
I am.
All right, and how large is that group?
It's members of TAC. Right now it's, we have Henrico County, City of Richmond, someone from CTAC, Chesterfield County, MPO, us, I believe DRPT, and maybe missing one other, but that's pretty much the group.
Kind of staff type people, basically.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, very similar TAC level.
The members of the CVTA, have they been chosen? I see the categories.
Yes, so they did go through with all the jurisdictions and any of the other agencies and had them give their members.
So we know the
well.
members now. Would you please send me a list of the members of the CVTA?
Sure.
Anybody else need that?
I'd like to see it. Sure.
Why don't you just send it to the board?
Okay, I'll have Jenna send it out.
Thank you. You say that the work group is that the same working group that's going to be working from the 19th to the 24th on an initial shot at a regional transportation plan?
Yeah, so somewhere in there is just going to be our kickoff meeting. We haven't set the date yet. We're still reaching out to everybody. So yes, we're going to go over exactly what that working group will look like, what our structure will be. But for the most part, we're going to present the scope to them as far as what we're planning on accomplishing. I see it being very similar to kind of our transit development plan, but just like an update to it. It's going to be very GRTC MPO led, but we do want to get feedback because our routes do run through the regions, as well as explain how our funding's done, all of that.
So you will actually have a tentative plan for the regional transportation, initial regional transportation outlay of funds from CVTA that you will be presenting to the August 27th meeting?
No, that will not be ready by August.
You'll just be talking about the process.
Correct.
Correct. All right. Thank you. And the I see here on your calendar, governance structure for transit service December 1st. What is that?
That is in the legislation, just setting up a governance structure for transit. Exactly what that means is still being discussed. The working group has come up with some recommendations, such as one of them is considering other jurisdictions that have routes also. Maybe they have some sort of, whether it's voting or not voting as part of our board, that's a recommendation, or some other way of just having input related to governance, but that still has to be recommended to CVTA and then has to go through the full plethora of GRTC as far as what actually works within our structure. So it's for discussion.
Yeah, we'd like to see that before it goes to anybody. So if you would
there's nothing that exists at this point. It's up to CVTA to present it. Those are just discussions that's been happening so far.
I know, but when you know stuff on this, I want to know something about it.
I can share my notes.
Yeah, because that's folks, that deals with how we go forward ultimately as a board and as a governance of GRTC. And
right.
Since we have a very dedicated and thoughtful representative in the process, I think it would be helpful for us to know what's going on.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for that. And all of you should have gotten an invitation. I got one today or yesterday to the initial meeting of the CVTA. Apparently, you can attend in person if you want to be socially distanced in the convention center. God knows there's enough space there for people to be socially distanced. And if you don't, you can sign on and go online and watch the meeting. So, did others on the board get that today or yesterday?
I have not.
Okay. What do you think? You did, Julie?
Well, yes, Mr. Chairman, if I may. Yes, I received it. I'll make sure that the entire board receives it this afternoon.
Okay.
I have had some conversations with Chet Parsons, who is going to be, I guess, starting the leadership on the staffing side, about some of the language in the bylaws and in the agenda package, just to clarify that what the CVTA language does say is that GRTC will develop the regional transportation plan and the regional transportation priorities. That we'll do it in coordination with the TPO, and that we will present it to the CVTA for them to approve those portions of it that require regional funding. I'm encouraged that so many folks on the CVTA and the staff and the TPO want to have participation in it, because it means that when we do come forward, we'll have something that is very inclusive. But everything that where we're going to request for funding will go through this body first.
Okay, and that wasn't clear in the stuff that Chet gave you initially?
I think that it just remains one of those items that bears repeating.
Okay, good. All right, friends, any other questions about this? This is big time for where we're going, so.
I do, Adrian. Has there been any attempt to reproject out revenues given the pandemic from the regional authority? I mean, I'm a little concerned that these dollars may come in shorter than we need. And so I'm just curious if you guys are thinking through that right now.
Yeah, I know the jurisdictions on their own have done some projections. I don't know if an official one has actually been done.
It'd be good to know whatever those are adding up to sometime soon, if we can get that.
Okay.
And nothing before October in terms of, what is that October date? Is that when we first see money? They,
I think that's when the first.
yeah,
That's when the sales tax begins to
Right.
get collected, is
Yeah.
around that time frame. The gas tax is already being collected, but the money, I believe, when I was reviewing the structure last night in the documents, that we were unclear whether or not the money would be directly distributed to us or be distributed to CVTA and come to us. And I believe what I read last night, I could be wrong, but my belief is that it will go to CVTA and then CVTA will send it to us. So we won't be seeing that money until CVTA is fully stood up and has the processes in place and bank accounts to receive money and send it to us. And they're going to be addressing that during their first meeting, getting their technical working group together so that they can start developing those financial avenues.
okay, Danny, you looking like you want to say something? You all right? All right. Any other questions? Okay, George, how's this look to you?
I'm good with it.
Okay. Eldridge?
I'm here.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Adrian, for your reliable and thoughtful management of our part in this. It's quite a thing and very historic. All right, that's it. Anything else on CVTA? Association for Commuter Transportation 2020 Award.
Good
Are
morning.
you doing that? Who's
Vaughn.
presenting
Good
this?
morning.
Am I presenting? Hi, Vaughn.
Hi there. I don't know if you can see me or not, but that's okay.
I'm
I would
looking, but I can't see you.
a little background that the Association for Commuter Transportation, it's an international association and leading advocate for commuter transportation and transportation demand management. It's actually comparable to AFTA for the transit industry. It strives to create an efficient multimodal transportation system by empowering people, places, and organizations working to advance CDM. During the organization's annual international conference, it recognizes and honors outstanding programs and achievements in the field of transportation demand management. The current status is, I'm very pleased to announce that RideFinders is the recipient of the Act 2020 Commuting Options Award, Vanpool program for our Falling in Love with Vanpool campaign. It utilized a multi-pronged approach and it had different strategies and incorporated different program elements to advance the Vanpool program, mainly to strengthen the van pools that we have, fill empty seats, and create organic van pools. I've listed the campaign results, but the most important, I would say, would be the 71 modal placements into existing van pools, which if you look at it as 7 to 12 passenger van pools, that gives you a number. And we actually started 12 new van pools. We've designated the month of February as the Van Pool Celebration Month, so we ran a campaign for that. And the emissions and the dollars saved and the miles not traveled and the impressions from social media and newspaper advertisements. And I'm pleased to announce that I accepted virtually on behalf of the entire team. So it's kudos to the entire team for the collaborative efforts for this successful campaign. So I'm very pleased for that.
Well, thank you so much, and congratulations to you and the entire team for this successful piece of work and for the recognition from the national operation. How's it? What has the effect on the van pools been of COVID?
It's really been putting well, as I think when we reported the last month, it had decreased by 55%. One van pool, one group has 18 van pools. They've only lost one van pool. Enterprise, which is a national entity, they were operating at less than 50%. And one van pool, the minority owned, it lost over half of its fleet. Some of it's starting to pick back up, and actually one of the team is working on starting a new van pool group. So it's slowly emerging, but still very, very slow because a lot of it is Northern Virginia and the governmental entities. And so we're constantly staying in contact with the vendors and the employers to see about their reopening structure, and it's all over the place. So it has had a large impact.
When you say the team, you're referring to the people that we employ?
Yes. Yes.
And how many people do we employ?
Well, I have 5 staff, but 2 of them are designated specifically to the fan pool outreach.
All right, thank you.
But everybody plays an integral role because there's so many little pieces that have to be taken care of.
Great. Any further comments, questions? Well, if we could have kind of collective cheers, I'd do it, but I think it'd be kind of strange on Zoom, so we won't. But thank you so much.
I've got a visual image and auditory sense of that, so thank you.
Right, exactly.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and congratulations for that constant quality work you guys are doing.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me. All right, so our next operation here is what? A report from Tim?
Yes.
That's good. Mr. Barham, we await your message.
Yes, thank you, sir.
Mhm.
And good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Starting with the overview of the KPIs this past month on the fixed route side, the OTP was at 67.50% compared to last month with 66.80%. And the amount of lost trips decreased dramatically down to 857 for the month of July compared to 1360, which was
Excellent.
So both of those factors are attributed to the fact that we had fewer incidents, service disruptions that occurred. There were only a couple instances in which we did have to suspend service late at night. But otherwise, there's been some level of normalcy, at least from this past month. The lost time, the absenteeism rate for our operators was down to 12.02% compared to 17.17%. We attribute that to a couple of things. One, fewer COVID cases, folks that are out due to quarantine or COVID itself. So that had impacted us in past months, but that wasn't nearly as much this past month rather. And also vacations, even though we're in the middle of summer, usually people take off. The vacation allotment each week has been pretty steady as well. And plus we're also tracking absenteeism, working with HR to go through those scenarios with long-term absences and so forth. So we continue to monitor and address those issues as well. So in fact, this past month was the lowest absenteeism rate we've had all year. We've been up in that 13, 14% range, but to see it down to 12, that is pretty good for us. Customer complaints were at 1.24 per 10,000 riders, which is also down from June, which was 1.60. So we continue to hopefully provide, good service and get fewer complaints as a result. We still have issues that we have to address, and I'll go over one in a minute, which can, explain what complaints we do have. As far as the FITS report goes, comparing this time last month, this past month to this time last year, for local fixed route, we were down by 6.58%. Compared to June, which was 10.97. The Pulse was down 38.62% compared to last month, 44.38%. Commuter service, 89.91% compared to 92.03% in June. So for the total combined fixed route service, we were down 18.21% compared to June, which was 22.91%. Care service down 29.21% compared to June, which was 44.70%. Care on demand down 24.38% compared to 36.23%. So the overall service was down around 18.56%. June, we were 23.59%. And for the fiscal year, which of course we're just 1 month into it, is 20.47% now. So as you can see, the rate of decline has gradually decreased, which means that we're slowly getting more and more people back on the service. So we'll continue to work as best we can to make sure we balance that to make sure that we're still providing the service we need as we continue to see the ridership gradually come back. And on Route 111, we also have seen an increase in that from this past. The goal, 140 per day and 70 on Saturday. For this past month, we did 119 for an average weekday compared to last month, or June rather, which was 101. And Saturday, 111 compared to 96 in June. So that ridership continues to increase along with our ridership as a whole.
That was the Saturday projection initially was 70 and we're doing 111?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And the weekday projection or hope was 140 and we're doing 119 now.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And let me just confirm these other figures. Our regular fixed route service is up to 95% now of what it was last year. Is that correct?
Local, actually, yeah, roughly 94%, give or take.
And our pulse is up to 60% of what it was last year.
Yes, a little over
And
60.
but the commuter routes are still at 10%.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
And on the specialized side, the care service, OTP is at 92.69% compared to June 92.81. So still holding steady as far as the OTP goes. Complaints, we had 4 this past month, 2.55 per 10,000 riders. But the significant part of this past month was that we had 6 commendations. More than, I think we had more in 1 month than we had almost a whole year combined up to this point. So most of those were accommodations, some towards the operators, good service, and also some feedback from the CSRs as well. As far as the COVID initiatives and maintenance related measures, in addition to what we have been doing over the last several months, one initiative we started this past month was no mask, no ride rule rather. And that was kind of a way to address more of the customers not riding with masks. That started several months ago. We've been offering masks to customers, but we took a little further step this past month and asking customers to please wear the mask. If they don't wear the mask, to supply them with one. And if they don't at that point, then the operator will just tell everyone that we can't proceed and call it in to get assistance. In some cases, the customers will just leave. In other cases, we have had to have supervisors come onto the scene and address accordingly. We've had 1 or 2 cases in which customers have said about reasonable accommodations. They can't wear it because of medical issues and so forth. So we address those on a case-by-case basis. But the main thing is we want to make sure that everybody remains safe. We still have a few vehicles, only a few, that don't have the driver shields. I think about 10 on the SpecTrans service and about 21 still left on the fixed route service. So we want to make sure that our operators, customers, everybody remains as safe as possible as we're still very much into this pandemic. So we hope that this step will help spread the word that you please, if you're going to ride, please have a mask or face cover. As far as the staff goes, we're at 278 full-time operators, 22 part-time. Our goal is, or our budget numbers are 290 and 26. So we're close to being there. We have 3 currently in training. They should be graduating sometime around the early part of September in time for the September 13th booking. We have a class of 5 that will start next week, actually, on Monday. And the last thing I'll mention about recruitment, we're working with the marketing department and HR in doing next series of commercial shoots. We'll be doing some filming of those next month, some updated versions of our commercials to increase recruitment, as we make sure that we have enough operators to accommodate the business. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Questions? Great report, Tim. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Are the drivers generally satisfied with the no mask, no ride thing? That's a tough piece of work that they have to enforce.
Yeah, and you get some mixed results. Overall, the operators are appreciative that we are taking that step. There's still some concerns as far as, the pushback. So, we're working with the training department to put out some additional training and online program to make sure that some of those customer service related issues, ADA compliance and things of that nature. But in the meantime, yes, they're cooperating, doing the best they can to deal with the situation.
Right. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Tony, Mr. Carter, you're on.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
In the last meeting, we discussed how we were going to switch up things with the safety report and add a little bit more information so it didn't seem so redundant. And basically what we did is went through and revived some stuff and added a little bit more definitions and a little bit more information, give you a better description of how the accidents playing out throughout the month. Starting with the actual total numbers of accidents, we did see an increase this month. In June, there were 27 accidents. In the month of July, there were a total of 34. As Tim sort of elaborated on, we are seeing people getting back out there and there's more traffic, and we're noticing more traffic, and contribute to the actual accidents and the uptick in that. Basically what we're doing is getting with the training department and some other individuals with GRTC, and we're making it more known that we're concerned about the safety and getting more information out. We're trying to bring what we do, take the safety meeting to the actual operators, since we can't have safety meetings here in the building, and just setting up with different locations, more of our more busy travel locations, and reminding them of certain travel techniques, certain safety techniques, things of that nature. As I stated, for the month of July, we had 8 preventable accidents. 9 preventable accidents were at 26. The month of June, we had 9 preventable accidents and 18 non-preventable accidents. So if you notice, we had 1 more preventable accident in the month of June than we did in July. And of course, we had 8 more non-preventable accidents in the month of July than we did in June. So the increase actually in the accidents were non-preventable accidents, which were accidents that the operators had no fault in. The next page of the safety report is basically a description of the accidents. And what we did is we took our most frequent types of accidents that we had and we broke them down by the actual month and the numbers. So bus made contact with fixed object. In July, we had 8. In June, we had 3. Out of these accidents, preventable, we had 6 in July, 1 in June. Non-preventable, we had 2, both in July and in June. We noticed that that was attributed to some actual trees and things of that hanging. A lot of bad wind, high winds, that type of thing. There was also some issues with the city of Richmond, who did an excellent job when we reported out. We noticed that there were some street signs and things of that nature hanging, and that attribute to the actual hitting of the fixed objects. And we have a contact with DPU who actually got out and really changed those and fixed those and corrected those problems relatively quickly. Collision with other vehicles. In July, we had 14. In June, we had 14. In July, we had 4 preventable accidents. In June, we had 4 preventable accidents. Non-preventable in July, we had 10. June, we had 10. So those numbers are dead on. It's one of those things where, as you can see, a lot of that is non-preventable accidents, which the operators had no fault in. Passenger accidents, slips, trips, and falls. In July, we had 7. In June, we had 7. July, 1 preventable. In June, we had 2 preventable. In July, we had 6 non-preventable accidents. In June, we had 5. And as you can see, the numbers are relatively close. We attribute that to the actual operators. Some of those things are just basically slipping and tripping as they get on the bus, avoiding the light from the actual bus. And we call those attributed to passenger accidents. Collisions between company vehicles. We had 2 in July and 2 in June. We had preventable, 1 in July, 1 in June, and 1 non-preventable in June, and 1 non-preventable in July. Damage to left outside, basically side swipe type accidents where a vehicle goes by and makes contact with the mirror. We had 3 in July, 1 in June. We had no preventable accidents for both the month of June or July. We had 3 non-preventable in July and 1 in June. Miles between total accidents. In July, we drove 12,382 miles between preventable accidents. In June, 17,427 miles between preventable accidents. In July, we drove 58,817 miles. In June, we were 52,282 miles. We had 1 accident that took place internal on the actual bus yard, and the 33 other accidents took place off of the bus yard. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Tony, is there anything that you particularly want us to know out of this that you feel like we should know?
Basically, the one thing that I would like to express is that with the COVID and with everything that we're doing to keep separation, the one thing that we are lacking is the actual safety meeting. I can't express to you how important that is. So that's why it's very important that I get with my staff and other staffs at GRTC. And we're, like I said, taking it to the actual operators, taking it out on the street, as you say, and just tell them how important and remind them how important it is. As you can see from the report, a lot of the accidents, the fault of the operators, but what we want to do is make sure the operators are prepared for other people's actions. That's how we keep people as safe as possible. So getting out there, spreading the word to be as safe as possible is the one takeaway from this.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? All right, so we move now to, you're still up for, Julie?
I apologize. I was on mute. I apologize. I did want to bring to the board's attention that this is a different format for the safety report than we've had in the past. What we're trying to focus on is to give you a little bit more transparency and to drill down on the nature of the different crashes that we have, how the majority of them do tend to be non-preventable. As you have a chance to hear Tony's report and review this format, if you do have any comments or suggestions to make it more to the style of the board, we would appreciate any feedback on it, as again, we continue to try and modify our reports for the needs of the board.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Carter, we have a thing on excess insurance, I believe, which is yours as well, correct?
Yes, sir. And this is more just of a notification type, informational. In the last board meeting, the recommendation was made by the board of directors to approve the CEO to enter into our normal insurance policy contracts. If you remember that one, I guess you say caveat or issue that we had was the $10 million in excess liability coverage. GRTC normally carries $20 million in excess liability coverage. However, we hadn't received any quotes at that point in time. It was also recommended at that time that we wait on the additional $10 million in excess liability and see what the actual price was and how that came in. Well, we waited and we didn't receive any quotes. There were no, because of the marketing, how the marketing is looking with excess insurance, there were no companies willing to give that type of insurance. We did receive a $5 million quote in excess, in additional excess insurance. However, the price of that was $262,000, which is a 26% increase in what we paid last year. And instead of $10 million, it was only $5 million in coverage. So what GRTC staff did, the risk management staff did, is got with insurance brokers, our insurance brokers, JJ Gallagher, and we did sort of an analysis on what the other clients that JJ Gallagher has that are referenced to GRTC and same type of transportation lines of GRTC and the same size. And we found that a lot of them are actually going to $10 million and reducing their coverage because of the rates across the board and how much the premium increases are. So what we decided to do is, as we stated, we're going to do loss ratios, continue to monitor our losses, continue to monitor costs. We did a loss run of the last 5 years and found that we hadn't had any type of losses that took us over that $10 million threshold. In fact, we weren't really close to anything near the $10 million ratio or $10 million loss. So the recommendation is to remain with the improved insurance coverage of $10 million in excess and not purchase any additional $5 million in excess coverage that was quoted. And in the upcoming renewals and throughout the year, we'll monitor and do cost analysis of our losses and make the determination if we want to increase it next year in the upcoming renewals.
All right, so we're saving money on this, not buying an additional 10 million. Apparently, everybody in management is pretty clear that we don't need it, and it has not. It's not being done by other people in the industry, right?
Correct.
Any questions on this?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I wondering, did you check with the Virginia Transit Liability Pool? I'm just curious about what they're doing.
We hadn't checked, and Mr. Coles, I remember you brought that up in the last meeting. That is going to be one of the things that we're looking into in the upcoming year, just to get with them and, you know, have them come in and give us some possible quotes and some ideas on how we, you know, may look at going in the future. But that is definitely on our list to look at them to see what they're doing and how they may fit into and may be a better fit for us to go back into the pool. But that's something that we're looking into at this point.
Okay, any further questions or comments on this? I'm taking, yes, Julie.
Oh, I'm sorry. I raised my hand too soon, Mr. Chairman.
I'm taking the silence on this as your tacit agreement with this policy, so that when we get the $15 million suit, we'll all know what we did.
Yes. So,
Well,
Okay.
Another half.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, Mr. Chairman, it is for that reason that this isn't a discussion item, but actually is an action item that we're asking that the board take action to approve this recommendation from staff to go from the $20 million down to the $10 million and to continue to assess it so that the board's on record with their knowledge of this change in our policy.
All right, could I have a motion to approve this decision?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we affirm the decision of management to not to buy the additional insurance beyond this $10 million.
Hey, Ben.
Yeah, Gary.
So I just want to encourage staff to stay on top of this insurance topic, just to make sure that when rates may drop back down, insurers get back into this market, that we are really on top of this. I think we're justified in our decision today, given cost and lack of interest, but we don't want to miss that opportunity when the insurance market shifts back.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm also interested in the pool issue that Eldridge has raised, because pools often give us an opportunity that would not otherwise be present. So please go right after that.
Yes, sir.
All right, moved and seconded that we approve this decision today. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? It's passed. Thank you very much, Mr. Carter, for your good work on this, and Julie as well. Now, did you want to say something, Julie, before we moved on to the next item?
That
No?
was it. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Let's see, Tanya, Ms. Thompson, we have something about buses.
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone.
On it.
GRTC submitted a corrective action plan to the FTA outlining how it would bring its fleet and spare ratio into compliance with FTA's guidance on fleet size. Under target set in the FTA approved cap, GRTC requested and received approval to dispose of 14 vehicles. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, staff began reevaluating its fleet needs required to provide safe service and to address regional frequency needs in FY 2022. GRTC requested and FTA approved a modification of the cap, allowing us to replace the 14 vehicles as opposed to disposing of them. We have an additional 15 buses eligible for replacement in 21. Of the 32 buses eligible for replacement, staff recommends purchasing 29 40-foot CNG powered low floor transit buses with delivery in FY 2022. The Commonwealth of Virginia's Department of General Services Division of Purchases and Supply has a contract with Gillig for a 40-foot bus that we may utilize. The unit price for this bus is $535,864. If approved, the first 14 buses are projected to be delivered the first quarter of FY 22, and another 15 in the third quarter of FY 22. Pricing does exclude surveillance cameras and CAD AVL equipment. These items will be acquired via separate procurement. State funds will be applied for in FY 22, in the FY 22 grant cycle, and our intention is to pay for the buses with federal, state, and local funds. However, there is a small possibility that the funds will not be awarded for the bus purchase. Staff will have to development of its 5-year capital plan to fund this purchase using higher amounts of federal and local funds. This is a state of good repair capital need for the safety of our operations. So staff feels that the risk of not receiving these funds will be low. Our recommendation is that the Board of Directors authorizes the CEO to issue a purchase order to Gillig for $15,540,056 for the purchase of 29 40-foot CNG powered low floor transit buses.
All right, you've just heard a recommendation for the approval of a 15 million plus expenditure of money that other people are going to provide to us. Are you, any comment on this? A replacement of the bus that we burned or was burned, is that a part of this?
No, sir, that was presented and you all approved that purchase back in July.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions, comments? Could I have a motion to approve this?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I do
Come
have
on, you
one
guys
question.
can do that. Show that you're awake. All right, the motion is passed. Thank you very much, Ms. Thompson,
Yeah.
for
I
your
have
excellent.
Ben, I have a
work on
question
this.
about buses.
Go
Julie,
for it.
have the coach buses, over the road coach buses reached their useful life yet?
You're muted, Julie.
You would think after 4 months I would learn to unmute. I'm still working on it. I would have to check with the vehicle fleet plan. I know that Tony Bird has redeveloped our entire fleet plan, and we do have some that are towards the end of their useful life and will come up for replacement. But I don't have the exact number for you. I will make sure to have that before the next board meeting.
I'm speaking of the coach buses. I think we got,
Yes, sir.
how many of those you got, over the road coach buses?
Tim?
We have 8 total, and Julie's correct. I think 3 of them are close to their useful life.
Thank you.
But they're not in this particular
Oh, no.
purchase line. Okay,
Yes, sir.
already. Okay, thank you very much. And Cheryl, did you show up because you're supposed to be doing something next? Or I think we have Adrian here for the service plan.
I think Tim and Cheryl jumped in to provide information for the board. I appreciate that. So.
Okay, good. Thank
That's
you.
correct, yes.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Fiscal 2021 September service plan approval, Ms. Torres.
Hello again. The September service change, so this is the result of the service equity analysis and just an overview of our public meeting. So the changes for September schedule were presented at the July board meeting, and they were identified as major changes according to GRTC's major change policy. And just a recap of what those were, this changes to the 1A, 1B, 1C routes. We are creating a core route that will go from Chamberlain and Wilmer to Southside Plaza to increase that reliability on that portion of the route. And then the 1A and 1C, they will become just branches in Southside, which will also improve some of the frequency on the 1C. And this is for Sunday service only. The 2B had a slight alignment change to incorporate Ladies Mile so that individuals in that area would not have to walk quite as far. The 50 is extended now to, or will be, to Marshall and 2nd, which is a further extension from Hermitage. The 75 has been removed, and its portions of the route will either be covered by the 76 and 79 for St. Mary's or the 77 for the Grove area. The 76 had a slight alignment change to St. Mary's. The 77, as I mentioned, is on Grove, but also it now continues down to U of R, as well as covers the fan area that did not have service before. The 78 did get some frequency increase to 40 minutes from 60, and the 79 had a slight alignment change to now serve St. Mary's Hospital.
The 77 is down, is on Grove Avenue in the fan now?
Yes, it is.
As ever, right? And the what was the 70? What's the one we discontinued? 75.
75. That was the U of R peak service route that also served the hospital.
Further questions?
How many people attended the public meeting? Out of curiosity? Do we have a good turnout?
It was not many. It was virtual, and I could only see who was actually logged in on
I'm just curious.
YouTube, and it was, I think, just maybe 6 people, and some of them could have been us. So the comments that we did receive were a bit more clarification. They did type some in the chat, and it was just making sure it still served the same timeframes as the current routes. But this did go out for public comment because this is our same plan that was going to go out in May, and we did actually do extensive outreach. So there were changes we actually did, like the 2B is the only one that does Ladies Mile opposed to, we were going to do the 2A and 2C. There were some other changes where we, I think the 75, we made sure we incorporated St. Mary's twice. So we had already done some outreach.
All right.
So the service, just a quick recap, the service equity analysis, we checked to make sure there was no disparate impact or disproportionate burden, and there was not. There was acceptable amount of change. So what I am bringing to the board actually is an action item for you guys to approve the September schedule to be implemented on September 13th.
All right, you have it before you. Are there any other questions or comments? Could I have a motion to approve this?
Approved.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'm counting. All opposed? It's passed. Thank you. And the next item is our smart scale project proposals. Adrian,
Yes.
thank you.
So Virginia Smart Scale, this is about picking the right transportation projects for funding and ensuring the best use of limited tax dollars. Just an overview of the program. Transportation projects are scored based on objective, outcome-based process that is transparent to the public and allows decision makers to be held accountable. There are 4 scoring categories. It's corridors of statewide significance, regional networks, urban development areas, safety, and then industrial and economic development areas. So how your project impacts these 4 different categories. Once projects are scored and prioritized, the CTP then takes the information and they do the selection process for the right projects for funding. Funding is not until FY 26-27 for this round. This is round 4. So it's quite in the future. But pre-applications were submitted on April 17th, and those that were approved either conditionally or fully approved, they were submitted actually yesterday. It's the due date. So GRTC can have up to 4 applications each round. And GRTC ourselves, we had one application that we wanted to do, and that was the articulated vehicles. So the 3 other slots, we let the jurisdictions each have one as a joint effort. So Henrico County did one, Chesterfield County, and the city of Richmond. And I'll give you just a brief summary of each of them. So the Route 1 accessibility improvements, this was the Chesterfield submittal. And this was for pedestrian accommodations between bus stops that have origins and destinations along Route 1. The next one is the city of Richmond. They also submitted one. And this is for improvements near the Arts District BRT station. It's for access and safety by constructing sidewalks, ADA ramps, curb extensions, crosswalks, pedestrian and streetscape amenities within a half-mile walk shed of the station. The next one is from Henrico County. They submitted Williamsburg Road pedestrian and transit improvements. This is for pedestrian sidewalks and multi-use paths along Route 60 from Charles City Road to Laburnum Avenue. It's for pedestrian crossing facilities at signalized intersections. It includes extended turn bays at Laburnum Avenue and directional medians at Finlay Street. And then of course, the articulated vehicles for BRT. And this is for, we requested in this particular grant would be for 3 60-foot articulated vehicles to arrive sometime in December to help us with our capacity issues, not just on the poles, but we hope that we'll have identified other corridors that will also use these on. So this is an action item as well. And so the recommendation is that the board of directors supports the above listed projects to be submitted for evaluation under smart scale prioritization. Unless you guys have any questions.
So with regard to the articulated vehicles, it sounds to me like even if the smart scale approved this, we wouldn't have them until about fiscal 2028. And I recall we asked that those be put in because we were suffering from a higher volume that we were unable to meet on the pulse prior to the COVID.
So this is a different resource of funds. We did apply for 3 already through our regular capital program. So this is just in the future to be 3 additional ones, assuming that we'll also have have capacity issues during that time, as well as for growth in the network. And I think that there has been an opportunity if it does show and they have additional funds within smart scale and they do see a use for it now, they can prioritize with excess funds or more near term.
Thank you.
So even though it's for FY 26-27, if there are funds now from other projects that are in excess, they can identify projects in the future to be funded in the short term.
Thank you. Julie, you turn on your mic. Somebody help her out. Is there a staff person that could come in there?
just to mute and unmute my button. Adrian's absolutely right. We've had some discussions about the smart scale timing, and it is possible, while there's no guarantee, that if this is the project that's awarded, it could be accelerated. And also, I know from conversations that our vendors, our procurement staff have had with both New Flyer and Gillig, who produce those types of vehicles, there's a possibility it might not take as long. So if we get the approval for the funding, the second we get the approval, we can start going through the contracting process so that when the funds are here, the vehicles are here as well. Honestly, the biggest holdup for articulated vehicles right now isn't the funding of the vehicles. It's overall the capital plan and being able to modify the pulse stations to be able to accept them, and the other lines to be able to work with our city partners so that the articulated vehicles will work on other lines as well. That's been our biggest holdup right now, is getting that forward. And I'll address that a little bit more in my CEO report.
All right, please do, and thank you. Any, can we have a motion to approve this? Do we need to approve this? Yeah, we do. Motion, please.
So moved.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No, I mean, nobody said no, so here we are. It's passed, and thank you very much, Ms. Torres. Excellent work. All right, I believe we move on to the financial report. Barry Herring. Mr. Herring, please help us.
Good morning. Hope everyone can hear me okay.
Mhm.
The financial report will be on pages 36 to 43 in your packet. I will start with the financials for the month of June. The overall net budget variance for the revenues and expenses, and this is combined year to date, is an unfavorable $2.4 million. As you will see on that summary variance page that I have, it's just kind of a neat little page to kind of let you know how things are going month over month. And what I'll just kind of pivot to that as well, as you will notice, when you look at that, you'll see from April to May to June, what the trend has been, and obviously it's because of the pandemic. But we went from a $594,000 variance, which was in March, which is not visible, but to a $15 favorable. This 594 is favorable to a 15 favorable to a negative 722 to a negative 2.4. And through that process, obviously the biggest trend obviously is the revenues, where we've lost a decline of 621,000 in the first from March until April, 576,000 decline from April to May, and 830,000 from May to June. And so you see at the June there for the total revenues a negative $2 million, almost 2.1 million. And for this first month in June, you see where we had for the expenses a negative 353,000, and it went, you see, from 692 to 531, so it was variable. But obviously the biggest reason for that are the extra expenses that we encountered during the pandemic, and that was obviously for the shield, cost of supplies, the extra bonus pay, just a number of things that are related to COVID. And so this is where we are now. And as I've kind of gone through that, I've kind of done some of the summary work, and from what this is, what's on your summary page. But as you can see, there were certain departments, so even through this negative variance, or this 2.4 million negative variance at the end of year, there were certain departments in the body of the report that were still favorable, and I wanted to point those out. You will also notice that for year to date, the planning, marketing, and scheduling actually have a favorable variance this for year to date at 419,000. Insurance and safety had a 297,000, almost 298, very favorable variance through the year. And then our purchase of service had 362,000, and the operating taxes and license had 151,000. And that totaled about 1.2 million. So even though we had a negative variance throughout the year, we still had some favorable variances in the department. And with all of these expenses, so we had a total of 5.3 million for this particular current month, 54,194,000 for the year. And you can see compared to the year-end budget that is of 53.8, that the difference between the expenses for the year, including all the expenses for COVID, related to what our annual budget was. And you do recall that we did get, excess allocation from our state partners of 1.1, almost 1.2, and also we have our CARES Act money. And as you see further down in the body of the operating summary, I'll show you in section 4 where we had allocated 3.5 million, 3,596 to be exact, for allocation for FY20, but in fact we spent 3.675, which is about 79,000 over, which I think we did an excellent job, because we were anticipating a number of things and it was kind of hard to hone in exactly, but I think we did a great job in projecting what that number might be. And I mention that because it's going to also dictate the amount of money we're going to be able to carry forward to FY21, which is going to be right on point. So I think we're looking good in that regard. One other thing I want to point out is in your report this time, you received another page behind the regular statement of income, which shows you the operating contributions. And as you can see that for the current month, we were favorable by 608,000, but year to date, we're about 1.7. Now, I want to make a caution, even though that's a favorable number at this point, these are preliminary numbers, and we will likely have some adjustments to the end of year expenses. Can't tell you exactly what they may be, but that is typical through the end of year closeout process as well as the audit process. So we will bring you a final number of what that will look like whenever that's done, but I wanted to give you these preliminary numbers so that you can see how we're looking as a result to the influx of additional revenue and how they were covering those COVID-related expenses in our financial report. If there's any, I mean, I'm happy to entertain any questions as we go through this, but I'm trying to give you a high-level summary and give you enough detail so that you have an understanding of where we are in the financials as of June 30th.
Barry, if I look at this report, this is Danny, I mean, basically, looking at the very first report of the 12 months ending, the biggest problem is the lack of revenue.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that our expenses are only over budget 350, considering the pandemic, that's probably not bad at all. So I think all in all, it is what it is, but it's mainly revenue driven.
It is. And I will say that some of those departments that had favorable variances, and that was probably also related to the pandemic, you know, the marketing didn't do as much marketing. We did stop the fair enforcers for the planning and scheduling. For the insurance and safety that's in that department, that was no longer utilized. So some of these things are a direct impact from the pandemic. So you're right, but primarily it's revenue driven. If no further questions, I did show the aging report for accounts payable and accounts receivable for your information. That thing changes monthly as it should. Strangely enough, the one thing I point out is that in the accounts receivable, you see that 177,000, almost 178,000, and that's primarily through when we have accidents, as Tony Carter mentioned in his report. Many times those accidents are not GRTC's fault. And so we have to bill the insurance companies as well as the individuals in order to pay us for their fault in these matters. And then after a certain period of time, obviously, we turn them over to collections. But that's primarily what that big number is looking at, is trying to collect from the individuals and insurance companies for their accidents related to our buses.
The aging report, I'm not sure I see that.
I don't either.
It's in the
Page
financial
39.
write-up. It's on page 39. Thank you, Julie.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right, I see it now. Apologize.
Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
very good. And I will. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Barry, I'd like to see, thank you very much for including the operating contribution sheet. I'd like to see the local broken out a little further next time, just since we have 2 or 3 major local funders.
If I may, Barry, what you'll see in that then is that predominantly historically, Barry, jump in here, but that's predominantly Richmond, where you'll see on the prior page, on page 40, Enrico, Petersburg, Chesterfield are under the other income purchase of service. That operating contribution local is predominantly City of Richmond.
Okay, good. Thank you.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Actually, their contribution is 15,915.
Yeah, it's in a different category. All right.
Yes,
sir.
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, that's other questions about the financial report.
Let me continue, Mr. Chair. I wanted to kind of give you an update on the audit, FY 2020 audit.
Please do.
You will see a little bit later that Leslie Roberts from Brown Evers will present the pension plan audit. I just use that to shorten it, but she will present that, and that's been completed, and that's obviously much earlier than it was last year. And we're currently, as they are beginning, the RideFinders audit is underway, so they're actually beginning to look at data and do analysis. And as a part of that, they're also doing planning and other work for the GRTC audit, because it typically follows the RideFinders audit. And so everything is going fine. We're on schedule, and we have not anticipated any problems. We don't anticipate any problems, and as of yet, we don't have any. So we're looking good, and things are working out well.
Okay.
And I think this is all I have for the financial report. Unless there are questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any questions? Good job, Barry. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Thompson, recent and upcoming procurements.
Hello again.
Hi.
Between board meetings, we've had 2 purchases that fell within the 50,000 to 250,000 range that required the board chairman's approval. The first purchase in the amount of $59,000 was for 20,000 face masks. And these are the masks that we're distributing on the buses to riders that may not already have one. And the second purchase in the amount of $69,599 is for cameras and related equipment for our fleet vehicles. Are there any questions?
So I approve this on your behalf.
Yes, sir.
And we've just also, you've got the other one, which we just approved, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And then regarding our current and ongoing procurements, 5 new procurements have been added to our working list. In the coming months, we will begin procurements for bus cleaners, safety consultant services, installation and removal services of our shelters, media buys for our operator recruitment, and postal mailing system. And that is all I have. Are there any questions? Okay.
All right. Thank you for that,
Yep.
Barry, for staying on top of it with us.
Yes, sir.
Barry, we're back to you on status of local service agreements and contracts.
Yes, sir. Good morning again. I just wanted to give you guys an update on our current service agreements with all of our jurisdiction and local partners. And I'll start with the city of Richmond. We have a good document. We've kind of, had discussions with that, but we've come to an agreement. We've signed it on our end. We've sent it back to the city of Richmond for their signature. So we're waiting for their signature to have that finalized. But in terms of the language and the understanding, I think we have an agreement and we're looking good there. So the actual document is not in my hands, but we have an agreement with an understanding. And so we expect things to move forward along with that. The next one is in Henrico County. In our contact person, we've gone back and forth with certain language, in certain clauses. And as far as the contact is concerned, and we are concerned, we think we have a good document there. Obviously, the contact is working with the county manager to get that document back to us so that we can have that finalized. But we feel like we got all the issues and questions answered, and we think we got a good document there, and we're expecting to have that signed shortly. I can't give you an exact time frame, but we just don't have any language issues as far as we're concerned at this point. As relate to Chesterfield County, I feel the same way. I can say the exact same thing. We have a good document. Our contact who's representing them feels like we've solved all the issues and problems or questions that were with the document. And so we're satisfied with the document. We think they are, but we're waiting to get final signatures in order for that to be finalized. The one document, though, City of Petersburg, they had some questions and some with some of the clauses, and so we are trying to work with them to try to establish or get a good understanding between them regarding what those issues are and work with them. We don't think we're too far apart from them. We just need to kind of resolve it as we did with the other jurisdictions, and we feel that we will be able to do that real soon. We're waiting to get this collective meeting. It seems a little challenging over the past couple of weeks. We haven't been able to pull that together yet, but we anticipate getting that done real soon and be able to resolve whatever those language issues that they may have and get that resolved. Let me just say, though, that this, we typically would have had this done sooner because of COVID-19 and all the attention that it demanded, right in the March timeframe, which is where we would have already started with our jurisdictional contracts. And our main attention, it just took all of our attention to deal with that. I mean, we had a lot of issues as we were meeting daily. We were trying to get, protective equipment, dealing with the routes and the social distancing and the whole thing. And so it just kind of caused us to delay, putting together our service agreements. We expect to have these things completed by the end of this fiscal year, so it'll be in time for the next fiscal year. So we can just kind of blame this particular delay on the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Well, these contracts differ a lot. I mean, for the delay of the jurisdictions to a lot of language changes, or I mean, sometimes these contracts are, don't change much at all, I would suspect, but maybe.
No, that's correct. Actually, 3 of the contracts are virtually similar. I'll say virtually similar. The City of Richmond's contract is a different contract, but the other 3 are virtually the same. And even though we made some modifications to the previous one, but there are not a lot of differences between those.
Okay.
But different jurisdictions have different interests or different emphasis on certain language, and
Focus changes from year to year, you're saying.
that's correct.
Yeah, I think, and we'll go into, I don't need to discuss this now, but I think the folks who represent Richmond need to know what the agreement is with Richmond. And I think the folks with Chesterfield need to make sure they know what's in the agreement with Chesterfield. Just so we're all playing on the same piece of music here. But thank you so much for that work. Any further questions on this? Okay, thank you, Barry. We now have a couple of action items, and one deals with the pension audit. So who's going to take this one on?
This is going to be Leslie, who is Leslie Roberts, and she'll be jumping on just a second. She is our auditor.
Mm-hmm.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah. Hi, I'm just going to go over the pension audit on a high level because I've met with management and gone over it with them, and they've had an opportunity to review and approve of the audit. Overall, the audit went very well. Barry and Dom were very helpful and available throughout the audit, and as Barry mentioned, we were able to do it quite a bit earlier this year than we have in the past. In fact, I mean, the main holdup was just getting the final actuarial evaluation in order to nail everything down. And so I'm just going to kind of go over our reports and our communication with those in charge of governance. The first report is on page 1 and 2 of the document. And on the top of the page 2 is our opinion is basically a clean, unmodified audit opinion. So we were able to come in and look at your pension information and documentation and issue a clean opinion overall on the financial statements that they fairly present the financial position and operations 2019. So that's kind of the bottom line of any audit. We were able to come in and as an outside third party opine on your audit and give you a clean opinion. The next report that we are required to do because we do this audit under governmental auditing standards is on pages 22 and 23. And this is a report on internal control over financial reporting. So if we had any issues that we encountered involving financial reporting and the controls over that, we would report those in this report as findings. We didn't have any of that. No material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies in material and reporting or internal control over that process. So that's another clean opinion, if you will. The next correspondence that we have is traditionally referred to as the management letter. It's the correspondence, the report to those in charge of governance. And I'm just going to point out some things within this document. Page 1 is my contact information, and Danielle, the engagement manager, senior manager's contact information, and Christy, the manager's contact information. So if you have any questions subsequent to this presentation, or feel free to reach out to us. I'm sure you know that Barry and Julie can give you that information as well if you need it, but it's right here in this document. The next page is the beginning of the traditional management letter. Basically, there are certain aspects of the audit that were required to communicate separately to those governance. If you look under significant audit findings, if we had that first paragraph, if you had any new accounting policies that were adopted, we would mention them here. You did not have any new accounting policies adopted during 2019. If we noted any transactions that were entered into that we felt like had a lack of authoritative guidance or consensus, we would mention those here. We didn't find any of that. If we had any other issues related to professional standards, we were here. None of that. If you have any significant estimates embodied within your financial statements, we report that, and those are mentioned at the top of page 3. And obviously, the total pension liability is an estimate. It's based on actuarial factors and key factors and assumptions, and your plan documents. Basically, we do rely quite heavily on the actuary in this manner because this is well out of the audit expertise. But that is a big estimate. There's lots of things involved, you know, life expectancies, when people will retire, rates of pay at retirement, health, you know, costs at retirement, that kind of thing. So, and the discount rate. So there's a lot of estimates in there. If we encountered any significant difficulties in the audit, we report them here. We didn't encounter any significant difficulties. If we had any corrected or uncorrected misstatements, we would report on them here. We did not note any mistakes, so we didn't make any audit adjustments, nor did we make any past adjustments, which would be like immaterial things that we determined were not worth, you know, either were estimates and that we didn't feel comfortable posting them, or they were immaterial. We didn't have any of that. If we had any disagreements with management, it would be put formally in writing here. We didn't have any of those. Of course, if we had difficulties during the audit and disagreements with management, we'd be talking to you much earlier than this formal presentation. We point out in this correspondence that management's representation letter is included here. That's kind of the hold harmless letter that management signs at the end of our engagement, basically saying that they've, you know, been forthcoming with the information that we've requested and that was necessary for our audit. Moving on to page 5 and 6, this is a report that we put in here if we have any additional comments. And basically it's saying that we didn't audit internal controls, but if anything came up that we felt like we should bring to your attention, then we're gonna give that comment. And if you move on to page 7, there are comments. The first comment relates to benefit distribution testing. We tested 58 files and 4 lacked support for the benefit calculation and pension payment options selected by the retiree. These were isolated to some of your older files, and we did not see that with the newer files. So this is pretty much isolated to your older files. We recommend that you obtain appropriate documentation now and going forward. The next one is participant census data. Out of the 15 participants we tested, we noted 3 instances where the gender of the participant was reported incorrectly to the actuary. So female, male, reported incorrectly. We recommend that information be checked and updated within your system to ensure that that's accurate, and they check the existing data that's in there, and then have some kind of control in place to make sure that's checked on an input basis. And that you can see in Appendix A, there's the management letter that was signed by management, and Barry signed it and the union president signed. That's really all I have at a high level to report. Do y'all have any questions?
Annie, you got anything?
No.
I know, it was riveting.
Pages would look better though, but okay.
Just to Just to clarify, Ms. Roberts, I think we put in our action item that this is for the FY19 pension audit. I believe this is calendar year 19 audit.
Yes.
So for the board's awareness, our action item does misstate that when you do accept the report, it's not for the FY 2019 audit report, it's for the calendar year 19 audit report.
Yep. Yeah, your pension plan is on a calendar year, whereas your operating entity is on a fiscal year. So yes, good point.
The reason for the difference? Wow.
Well, I would say it's based on payroll data, and most of that is accumulated on a calendar year and reported on a calendar year. And I've never seen a pension plan audit that's on, well, actually, I can't say that. I have one that's got a November year end, but typically they are December calendar year ends.
That was just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I think it's based on the payroll documentation and the extent of it, and that's a normal reporting period for payroll.
Okay, further questions on the audit? And the two suggestions there about records, I assume management has taken those into consideration to get the gender right and recover any records that we can for.
If I may, and we did have a discussion internally about the records. The records that I believe were of issue were ones that were 20 or 30 years old.
Right.
They're very old. The newer records are not having the issues. So we will be looking at some of the oldest records and seeing what we can do to correct them. But for some of them, they may be so old that there is no ability to get data from 20 or 30 years ago. Regarding the sex, we absolutely will be looking at making sure that that's correctly identified for all people in the plan.
Thank you so much for doing that. All right, do we need to approve this?
Accept it, sir.
Accept it. Could I have a motion to accept the audit?
So moved.
Somebody seconded.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded that we accept the audit as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, it's been accepted. And thank you very much, Ms. Roberts, for your work.
Thank you.
You know, the duller it is, the better we are.
Exactly.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right, Barry Herring, contingency fund policy.
Yes, sir. Good morning again. I want to share the contingency fund policy. Bear with me a second. Okay. Let me just go ahead and kind of read over the background. The contingency reserve fund is to ensure the financial stability of the mission, program, projects, and ongoing operations of GRTC. Reserve funds are established to cover operational cash flow, unforeseen operational expenditures, or revenue shortfalls, undefined but anticipated and unfunded activities, and capital commitments for anticipated projects. Sound financial management includes monthly review of cash flows and annual review of the reserve policy by the Board of Directors. The current contingency fund policy is silent on the use of contingency funds being used for temporary operational or capital cash flow requirements. As GRTC has no lines of credit, this ongoing practice is critical for the monthly sustainability of GRTC operations and cash flow. I'm going to move down a little bit further because I want to go over the highlights of the changes of the new policy that we are recommending. Okay, one of those will be the operational cash flow, and I hope you had a chance to read through this, but I'll hit the highlight points. Currently, GRTC has a $5.7 million contingency reserve fund, but you'll see in the goal of the reserve where it says 15 to 25% of the annual budget, and what that equates to is $9 million to $15.1 million based on a $60 million budget. And so given that number, if it's approved, we are considerably short in our current fund, so we would need to increase that, or at least discuss what the increases might be for that particular area, for that target. But as the operational cash flow is concerned, because of the ebbs and flows of money coming in and receiving funds from our payments, from our billings and what have you, expenditures are consistent. Obviously the receivable and receipt of cash funds are a little bit inconsistent. So we would like to be able to utilize this money throughout, able to meet, the payrolls, meet other vendor payments as required in order to manage through a given month when the cash flows are not meeting the expenditures. And so that's what the first letter A is referring to. And we are suggesting that we need to maintain a positive cash flow. $5 million reserve fund shall be designated for specifically operational cash flow purposes. Okay. The second part of this will be line item B, or letter B, is a $2 million local match for capital projects. In the process, and you've seen the cash flow report that we will go over in just a little bit, is that you will see during the given month we might have capital purchases, and we will need to have to pay out before we get reimbursed. Some of our expenses are grant reimbursed, particularly for grants and capital projects are grant reimbursed only, which means that we need to, pay that out before we get the monies back. And so we're going to need a buffer or some type of cash monies in order to pay those bills before we get the reserves. Before we get the reimbursements back. And so we're recommending a $2 million local match for capital projects. And $1 million of that is for actual payment of it, and the other $1 million is for the matching of the capital projects that are required by local match. The second, or actually letter C, is for the regional transit service. And as we had a report on that earlier this morning by Adrian, we're still working through, some of the structure of that. But once we start receiving monies for this, and once we have a transit development plan or something in place, and until things are actually worked out, we may receive monies. And what we are recommending or suggesting is that we have a place to put those monies until the plan has been adopted and approved by the board and the CBTA, until we administer that. And so there's a kind of a timing lag so that we can utilize the money to pay for the service, but we need a place to maintain it until that time happens. And that's what item C is attempting to cover. And then we have the special events or special services, which is just things that come about, jurisdictional or state could request GRTC to cover personal alignments or emergencies, and we need to be able to manage that, and we need a line item so that we can have approval for that type of service. And then item E is for extraordinary circumstances like COVID pandemic and whatever those entail. There could be any number of expenses that we may incur as it relates to personal protective equipment, some other equipment, shields and what have you, supplies and materials, and even bonus pay or frontline pay for the services for the operators and people who are impacted by that. And we want to be able to have a clause or section of the reserve in order to speak to that. So this is essentially the changes, for the most part, that we are asking the board to consider. Obviously, the reporting, what we will do is we will report on this on a monthly basis, and we will show through a cash flow projection, what monies we may have used and what monies we've put back in the reserve fund, so that you can see that transactional activity and be as transparent as possible. As I go, I want to go a little bit further because I want to show you guys the cash flow statement. I hope you had a chance to take a look at it. But in July, and we typically in a cash flow statement, you will show on a day-by-day what types of activity will hit during a given month. That document would be very, very long. So what we decided to do is show you the expenses up front so that you can see what the demand on cash would be, and then show you the revenues at the bottom. And typically, our revenues are received a lot later than we get the expenses. And, obviously I start with payroll because that is, a consistent date that those are paid every 2 weeks. And, for July, August, September, you can see the payroll. In October, it's a little bit larger because there's a third payroll there, and I just want to point that out. But in the month of July, you can see the demand on expenses $6.3 million. And that does include vehicle purchases that we purchased our 12 paratransit vans that we had most recently that you may recall. And part of that money, as well as all of these other monies, we have to kind of pay this out front. As you can see, the beginning balance of cash was only $136,000. We did get some money mid-month, but most of our monies came near the end of the month. And so as a result of that, you know, it was necessary that we use a transfer into revenue of $2.5 million. And you can see, once we collected all the money, we had 8.7 versus 6.3. And that means we had a 2.5 that was able to carry forward to the next month, which was good. And that can cover us through the collection of money, the payment of expenses, and the receipt and the collection of receipts from our places that we normally get money from our jurisdictions, from the state of Virginia, which is at 832, and other places in Rico, Chesterfield, and other places that owe us, and particularly VCU and others. But this the timing of when we get money and when we have to pay money is so critical. So based on the way this is showing, we shouldn't need any additional money, and we should be able to pay the line of credit back, the reserve back in the September. And that will likely be at the end once we realize our federal monies, our state monies, and our jurisdictional payments, and any other collections that we're expecting. And so I will stop here in case you have any questions. So I can talk another 10 minutes about this because it can be very detailed, but I'll just stop it there at a high level and answer any questions that you may have.
Well, I like having the designation on the balance sheet specific to this fund. We've not had that before, have I? I'm trying to find a financial report with all these papers, but
yeah, actually, in the balance sheet, it's under restricted funds. Okay. And there is a line that says restricted funds where this will reflect, because it is restricted to certain uses. Sure, so that's where I
like that broken out, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, actually, we are going to break it out to a separate line item so you can see that specifically.
So I understand two issues here, or two things. One is to make it known to all of us that in fact we have been using our reserve, which is about what, 5.5 million?
5.7 million.
Yeah, we've been using that regularly to help cash flow issues for our operation, and July was a good example of that, where Barry had to pull 2,500. I'm not sure that we've ever fully adopted that as a policy of the board, but it has been regular practice up through this time. And
that's correct. We've been, yes, sir.
So that's one reality. The second is a presentation of a rather extensive proposed policy on reserve funds, which I do not intend for us to approve today. This is far too detailed, far too important. Sets targets of 15 to 25% in reserves, which are totally unreachable at this point in time, and requires us to do some more conversation with one another, looking over exactly how we want to achieve this, if we want to achieve it. We don't have a way of raising reserve funds except by raising reserve funds. So I'd like to work on that some more. If you want to do some preliminary talk on that or ask questions of Barry about what we're doing on cash flow, we could do that at this point.
Yes, sir. If I may, one thing I would like for the board to approve is maybe a retroactive approval of the use of the contingency fund for the July use that we were able to do, and we actually didn't have it spelled out specifically in the language, and so that can be viewed as approved. And any time we need to use anything further before this is adopted, we will seek the board's approval for the use of it.
So Barry and Julie, do you think we need, is there a limit we should state on that within the reserves? I mean, I think we could give a motion of approval for the use of reserves for cash flow.
I think the use of the reserves would mainly, in the interim from meeting to meeting, would be, with the chair's approval or awareness of that, and then staying within the limits of the policy itself.
Yeah. Does the policy state a ceiling on that?
I mean, we have
The-
limited funds, I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, the ceiling is what's in the bank, right? I know.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also important for the board to understand that if something were to come up, an emergency were to come up where we would need to use the contingency funds, if we have it tied up in cash flow, it will not be available. The urgency of bringing this in front of you is that exact reason. That's beginning of the fiscal year every year is one when cash flow tends to be tighter. We're entering into service agreements. Those agreements are not in place, which means that the income that's coming or would be expected to come from our local partners is delayed. In this case, we are in the middle of August, heading towards September, and we still do not have those partnership agreements in place, and yet we're still providing service and paying those bills. So the use of the contingency fund for that purpose is very important, and the understanding that it's unavailable for any other purpose at this time is also very important.
I guess one question, well, I know the answer, but the question I have, what's the alternative? And I guess the answer is having a line of credit.
Yes, sir.
And
That's correct.
And that is, and to me, just to try and focus what our discussion will be on this whenever you're ready, for us to think this through, then is, do we want to be in the business of having a line of credit, which obviously gives us the flexibility to manage these things, but comes with, its own cost, and, just, I'm not sure how the optics are for a line of credit, with those who actually fund us. I don't know how they would perceive that. I literally don't know. So, I just, I don't know really, what we do here beyond this practice that has seemed to maybe not haven't had the best of transparency, but that seems to sort of work out, and over the years. But maybe the idea is having the line of credit in case this fell through or something happened and we needed the dollars, and they were tied up in cash flow, and then it's the second line of emergency funds. I don't know, not a money guy, but that's basically how I see it.
Yes, if I may.
I think we've just been vague in terms of this contingency fund, in terms of how and when it's to be used and what it's to be used for and things like that. Just say an emergency fund we can call upon. We just haven't been specific to this point like we are now, which I think is a good step forward.
If I may, I know that there's a lot of other transit agencies that do have and do rely on lines of credit because they don't have the available cash flow to be able to put out for payroll, to put out for the capital purchases in advance of the operating subsidies coming from partners. It does cost money. Even if you don't use it, it typically costs money. The difference being is that having this money in our bank account to be able to use, it actually generates money. When we're not using it, we have it in an interest-bearing account, and it does create revenue for us. While it certainly is a wise discussion to consider whether or not we want to increase our reserves for this use or we want to use a line of credit, know that one of them generates revenue and the one of them costs.
Hey, Julie.
Yes, sir.
I think my recommendation on this would be, we certainly want to have a specific goal on what we want to have in our reserves for some certain date, whether it's December of this year or December of next year, whatever that may be. And let's just say it's $10 million. And the idea is that we don't drop below $10 million in available funds in case of an emergency. So in that case, a line of credit is a backup. Even if we decide to use the reserve funds to fund our cash flow needs without having to pay any interest, we still have the line of credit there to support us if an emergency hits. And then maybe the idea is once we get up to a certain level of reserves, we don't need the line of credit anymore. But lead, George.
So here are the options. The options are, you know, if you don't have the money, you can stomp on the people who haven't given you their money yet. You can not pay your bills, which could include your salaries. You can do cash flow through your reserve fund until you run out of it, or you can use a line of credit. I mean, there's not a lot here. I'd like to thank you so much for this work and for the detail in the proposal. Julie and Barry, it's given us options and a good way to look at it. What I'd like to do is to ask the leadership of GRTC to continue considering this next month, and also for those of you who have other suggestions or thoughts on this, to communicate with the management and or with one another or with me about where we are on this, so that perhaps by the next meeting we can look at the overall policy. And right now what I'd like is a motion, which in fact is an interim motion, to approve the use as necessary of our reserve funds for the cash flow purposes that they are currently and habitually being used for. So if you agree, could I have a motion to approve the use of the reserve funds in this fashion as has been our practice?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on that motion? All in favor? There's some muted eyes. I see mouths moving. All right. All opposed? All right, thank you for that. That's approved, Barry, so continue the way you're doing. Report on it as you have now so that we can really monitor it better. So we're all knowing what we're doing in this. I think that's very helpful to get that up on the surface. And
Yes, sir.
Julie and Barry, we'll all continue this conversation during this next month, so that if we look at our overall policy, and if we do ask for an increase in the reserve funds, we'll have some discussion about how we might go about getting that.
Absolutely.
Which I think in the present moment is more difficult than it might seem. Okay. Thank you so much for that work. And now we have the CEO's report.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the board. So just a quick update that in the month of August to date, we have had one additional case of COVID that just got reported to us. So we now have a total of 19 cases of COVID in the entire agency since March timeframe. We continue to track it closely. We look for every opportunity to protect our staff and our community, and I believe that showing how infrequently we have had new cases within the agency is evidence that our protective measures are continuing to work, and we continue to educate and train our staff for their protection and for the protection of our service. State funding. So one of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention is that as we're looking at cash flow and as we're looking at year-end and operational budget and tracking, the state is doing the same. You may have seen in the papers that they have a significant budget deficit that they're trying to work through, and the state legislature is talking about that. Part of that discussion does affect transit. Can you hear me? I'm giving a little feedback. I want to make sure that you can hear me.
I can.
I can.
Yeah.
Oh, great, thank you. It's probably just my phone then. Perfect. So the first thing I want to point out is that while we are still working on cash flow and we still are looking for the contract with and the service agreements with our local partners, we also still do not have a full commitment of our state operational assistance for FY21 either. They've given us a quarterly allocation and approval that will last until October. And then once we get to October, we're told it might be that we get monthly approvals as they're working through their budget. The risk there, not to be alarmist, but the risk there is that we could get into October and not have our state operational allocation, which is somewhere over $800,000. And I say it's not something to be alarmed about because I don't believe that it is. The state, I've talked with the state and we're in good communication with them. They need to, of course, make sure that they fund the high priorities across the state. Transit is one of those priorities. I don't feel like the risk that the state would stop operational subsidies to their transit agencies is a high risk. It's just one that I want to be aware of. Should that happen, it's always good to have a backup plan and be aware of what the risks are, even if you think they're unlikely. And at this point, the backup plan is that we have a limited amount of CARES Act set in the budget for just this type of contingency. It won't last very long, and we can also look to reinstate fares on our service that would be able to accommodate any potential funding gap. Again, I'm not worried. I'm confident in state funding and that they will provide the operational assistance that we rely on, not just for us, but across the state. But this is just something to be aware of and to watch, which is what we are doing at this time. With that said, the capital plan, I had hoped to bring you a capital plan this month for FY21, along with a 6-year blueprint up through FY 2026. We discussed it last month, and I hope to bring it to you this month. There's a couple of items that have delayed the development of that to the point where I feel comfortable presenting it. Last month, we talked about, Keisha Reed presented some of our funding sources and match assumptions. And next month, she'll bring together certainly the committed funded projects for FY20, as well as the critical FY21 projects that need funding to move forward. And we'll bring pieces of it to you, but it might be another 2 months before we have that solid FY21 plan and FY22 and 26 funding scenarios. You may recall that the summary level information that I gave, or that Keisha gave last month, indicated that nearly all of our funding goes towards very high priority needs, but you might also recall that it's very heavily dependent on state and local funding. And while we continue to work with our state and local partners on their budgets and their funding, that creates some variability in how we fund some of those capital resources. So specifically, that was also brought up in the approval of the vehicle plan that you just, the $15 million, where a significant amount of the money that is approved for the vehicles will come from the FY 2022 state plan. Should that money not come from the state to match it, we would look for other resources in our federal and local funds to balance it. So again, we don't have a firm commitment from the state resources on how they will invest. Talking with them, similar to the operational budget, I'm not too worried about their commitment to fund state of good repair projects, such as replacement of vehicles. This is a very, very high priority for the state. They have committed to that year over year. I believe that that state money will be there for our state of good repair projects. Funding these is a top priority, and we will see that. But again, it's good to be wise, look at scenarios, and just in case, what happens if the money doesn't come through. So Keisha's working on some funding scenarios that when we do come with you, we can show you the likely funding scenario, a backup funding scenario, so you can make good policy decisions on how we're prioritizing and funding those projects. What that means is that proposed projects such as the downtown transfer center, the demolition and development of the adjacent church annex property, pointed over my corner because it's next to us, and other major capital projects, will have to fight for any remaining or limited capital resources that we have in that planning process. Some of our current projects are also seeing some delays that as they need to be prioritized by our local partners. So with that, I am pleased to say that the City of Richmond did add a clause to their 2021 service agreement that I did sign last week, stating the following, and I'll read this verbatim, it's pretty short. The recipient shall work with the city to establish an ad hoc committee to develop capital projects to be included in the GRTC Capital Improvement Plan. The committee shall be established by December 31st, 2020 to be concluded no later than July 1st, 2021, and will as a minimum address the $9 million settlement of federal interest in FTA capital funds and the City of Richmond's downtown transfer facilities. So first, the money referenced here is associated with the sale of the Davis Avenue property, which we have said for several years is going to be dedicated to a downtown transfer center. What does need to be clarified is that I was under the misunderstanding, inaccurately, that the entire $9 million or the majority of the $9 million had federal interest. It was clarified for me yesterday that's not the case. Only a portion of that $9 million is federal use. So again, as we balance the flavor of those monies, how much is local and how much is federal, will go into the development of that capital plan and how we advance with projects such as the downtown transfer facility. So the formation of that ad hoc committee for the service contract will certainly help us to increase the transparency of our planning process, identify what our available funding is for capital projects, and will help us to prioritize the needs of how we move forward with those projects, including the proceeds from Davis Avenue. I'm very hopeful that it will increase opportunities to see that these projects aren't just identified for our capital list, but that they're also identified for that local, state, and federal funding partnerships that we need to get them advanced beyond just funding our state of good repair. Adrian Torres, who is our Director of Scheduling and Planning, has been tasked internally to initiate the first steps of putting this working group together with the city. She's also been tasked to reach out to our other service partners, including Chesterfield and Rico and the TPO, to be part of that, so that as we're developing our capital list beyond just our state of good repair projects, our fleet replacement, and our facilities, that we have a large list of reasonable, solid, and developed projects that we can prioritize and develop financing plans for. And so as we come out of COVID, we have a good way to move forward quickly and advance the regional needs for transit, both locally and across our jurisdictions. It also will make sure that as we prioritize our limited capital resources between state, local, and capital funding, that we're making our best decisions with those limited resources. So with all that, that's a lot of words to let you know that we did not come this month with a capital plan, but we are still in the development. There are a lot of moving parts, and we hope to have that capital plan for you to review with very specific projects on it as a draft within the next 2 months to be able to develop those funding scenarios. With that, so I have no other updates this month. Just last month, when I finished my CEO report, I asked for rain and cooler days. I think we got the rain and the cooler days, probably more than I had hoped. So this month, I think I'll just say thank you and let well enough alone, and hope we have a good month in August to September. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, if there are no questions, that does conclude the CEO's report for August.
Just the old saying is, never be careful what you ask for, right?
Exactly. Who knew we would get this much rain?
Well, thank you, Julie. So this basically what's going on is that we, in our contract with the city, are specifying that we're going to have a working group to look at issues particularly around the downtown transfer center, which they really hadn't been paying any attention to once Navy Hill went belly up, and obviously other things have been tacked into that process. And so Adrian and Julie, as you begin to look at city projects, please communicate directly, especially with the 3 members on this board from the city who represent the city, so that we can make sure that that we're fully in tune with and apprised of that. I don't really have any other reports. I think folks are doing an incredible job. One of the interesting and delightful things about our new CEO is that, are you still new, Julie? Let's see, it's almost been a year.
I am this is 11 months. Next month will be a full year.
Okay, well, we'll give you an exciting year next year. I mean, we don't want you to have a dull start. And so next year we'll try to give you something to really challenge you. And but one of the fun things about Julie is that she always thinks of contingencies ahead of time. So she's out there imagining different possibilities, some catastrophic, some supportive and beneficial as we go forward. And it has genuinely been an exciting year, and I am convinced that it would have been exciting even had the circumstances not made it exciting, because there's a lot of imagination and energy going in GRTC right now, and I'm very grateful for it. We do have a need for an executive session, and I hope somebody's got the language to move it. Does anybody have a document? Ian, you're the one who's supposed to do this stuff. I didn't take it off my computer. Can you put it up on the board and let somebody read it, Julie?
I can, if you give me just a moment, I will bring it up.
I don't mind reading it.
Thank you. Ian's ready to read it. All we have to do is get it up there.
Bingo.
Okay, this is the one to certify that it was done. Let me get the one to certify that you can go into it.
Yeah.
And I think, here we go. I will bring that up right now. Can you see that, Ian?
There we are.
All right. I move that the board hold a closed meeting pursuant to section 2.2-3711A29 of the Code of Virginia to discuss the status and terms of a collective bargaining agreement, because discussion in an open session would adversely affect GRTC's bargaining position.
Second, please.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we have to go into an executive session.
Mr. Chairman, if you'll give me a minute, I need everyone that's not part of the executive session to now leave the meeting, and I'm going to transition you to not live. Bear with me. All right, and we are out of closed session. You're live again.
All right, thank you. Whereas the Board of Directors of GRTC has convened in closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the previous provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the board that such closed meeting was conducted in conformity with Virginia law, now therefore be it resolved that the board hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, 1, only public matters lawfully exempt from an open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certifying resolution applies, and 2, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Witness the following vote of the board members: Ben Campbell.
Aye.
George Braxton.
Aye.
Gary Armstrong.
Aye.
Eldridge Coles.
Aye.
Ian Milliken. Aye. Danny Smith.
Aye.
All right, thank you. Is there any further business to come before this board? All right, if not, the meeting is adjourned. I'm going to go play with my granddaughter. See you guys.
Thank you all.
Take care.